council here, but they may be here till two.
All right, so we've got Mike O'Grady here to walk us through H 44. This is the Senate or the House Miscellaneous Ag Bill that the Senate amended. We've already seen a lot of this and had discussions, I think, about almost maybe all of it now at this point. We've been through. And before we take a straw poll this afternoon, if we're ready on the amendment, we do need to have Ledge Council to show us what's here. And then Representative Sakowicz from the Environment Committee has offered to come in and answer any questions that you might have about the section dealing with paint, extended producer responsibility, and anything else that I guess it's another section that was in their committee.
Covered household hazardous products.
Yes, yeah. So before we get started, yes.
How do things, judgments on germaneness get dealt with? Because obviously some of these aren't naturally agricultural subjects.
You would have to talk to the House clerk. This is a miscellaneous bill. As the bill is coming over from the Senate, it has a section related to extended producer responsibility. So it has something related to waste management. Whether or not the clerk would rule that that was germane or not don't think you would have to ask her. But there are arguments that were made for why it was attached to this bill. So,
Those arguments were made in the Senate
in the Senate.
and they were persuasive. Apparently.
No one raised the germaneness issue. If no one raises it, it's not an issue.
On the floor.
Right. Or anywhere.
Can happen in committee too.
There you go.
All right.
Okay. Well, section 1, the first 24 pages. It's the beneficial substance changes that you had in H 484 as passed out of the House. Nothing has changed in that language. And if you want, I can skip ahead to page 25.
I think we might as well. Yeah. Everybody good with doing that?
I have to go.
Section 2 is where you get the pesticide disposal provisions. Right now, any person who wants to sell a pesticide product in the state has to register that product annually, and they pay a $200 fee, $185 of which goes in to the pesticide registration special fund. One of the things that the agency is supposed to use that fund for is the collection of unwanted and obsolete pesticides, mainly through the solid waste management entities. But the solid waste management entities for years have been saying that the agency isn't covering their cost. And they want their costs to be covered because by statute, it's supposed to be. But the agency doesn't have enough money to do that right now. So what they're proposing is to have an additional $50 per product registration fee that would be deposited in that special fund, the pesticide registration special fund, to be used for the collection. 929A6, you see 929A6, that's the requirement to collect unwanted and obsolete pesticides. And then that fee shall be in place until an EPR program is implemented. Now, industry, the agency, and the solid waste management entities all agreed to this. And then you might hear that $250 sounds like a lot. It is not an outlier. There are states around the country, including New England, that have higher fees. There are states around the country, including in New England, that have lower fees. And then you have New York, and I can't figure out how they register that pesticides. It's a weird system. So it's not an outlier. It's kind of right there, sort of maybe in the high average, high middle. but not on the highest and not the lowest. While that fee is being assessed, there's going to be a study conducted by the Secretary of Ag to look at options to reimburse solid waste management entities for all costs associated with collection and disposal of unwanted or obsolete pesticides. And then the cost of being reimbursed, this subdivision A2, when the SWMMEs are looking for cost reimbursement, these are all the things that they include. The cost of labor, equipment, supplies, maintenance. And for this program, they're also looking for environmental service fees and insurance fees, because these types of products, pesticides, can be hazardous, and they can be expensive to dispose of with an environmental service fee, and they can be expensive to insure if you're handling them. So that's what they want reimbursed. Then on or before December 15, 2025, they report to you. They shall include a recommended funding mechanism that will cover all costs associated with collecting unwanted pesticide. I want to point out like a little kind of interesting aspect of this. The fee stays in place until there's an EPR program, but the agency is not required to recommend an EPR program. It's required to recommend a funding mechanism. If they don't recommend an EPR program, the fee is going to stay in place. And it will be used the way that it's used now to reimburse the SWMMEs for their costs.
This language is, again, okay with, those, all three parties are okay with.
All three parties are okay with the language.
And presumably they understand what you just.
Yes, they were the ones that drafted it.
Everything else.
Thank you. Will the agency require new monies to administer this program, or they've got it covered already?
No, I mean, it's the same products that are going to be registered, right? And they're going to collect more.
Yeah,
And the SWMMEs are already collecting the pesticides. They're just not getting paid their full reimbursement costs.
that has those waste people.
Right.
Okay, and that keeps them from going across the lake in front of my house. Maybe.
Okay.
Representative O'Brien.
Right. Just quickly, will this end up as like a line item revenue source at the Agency of Ag?
So the pesticide registration fees are revenue sources for the Agency of Ag.
Okay. And then from there, they'll do like an interagency transaction.
There's no interagency transfer. It's that language 929 AC, that's in Title VI. That's an Agency of Agriculture program. They are required to pay for these costs. The Agency of Agriculture is required to pay the solid waste management entities for these costs.
So it doesn't flow through A&R, it goes straight.
Doesn't go through A&R and R, it goes through the Agency of Ag.
Okay.
Completely an Agency of Ag program. It's just that they're interacting with municipal solid waste entities who are permitted by A&R, but.
Right. Okay.
Section 4 is a stormwater provision related to the 3-acre permit at the Rutland County State Fair. I think you all know there is a 3-acre permit, a stormwater permit that is applicable to 4 fairs, ag fairs, and right now the Champlain and Memphremagog watersheds. The Agency of Ag worked with the fairs, those 4 fairs, over the past couple of years to get them money and to get them to the point where they could be permitted. And 3 of those 4 fairs are doing that. Rutland, however, has unique site constraints. They are bounded on one side by a railroad, on another by a highway. There's a swamp there. There's development there. It's not like Champlain Valley where you have a ton of land that you could work with, or Addison where you could work with the land there. So the the agency, Secretary Moore and Deputy Commissioner came and went down there to review the site, and they had acknowledged that there are unique site constraints. And what they proposed to the Senate Committee on Agriculture is not to exempt the Rutland Fair from 3 acre. They still have to get a permit and they still have to do what they can on site. But once they've identified what they can do on site, normally you're required to pay an impact fee or do an offset project to meet your performance goal. So they can do only so much on site themselves towards their performance goal. Normally, they would be required to pay an additional impact fee or do an additional project in that watershed. This language exempts them from that additional impact fee or that additional project. It will reduce their overall cost of complying with the 3 acre because of their unique conditions.
Go ahead.
And we heard there's already a exemption sort of clause in a general one in the 3 acre rule.
No. There was, at one point, that has been removed. All the fairs or any agricultural fair that triggers the 3 acre is gonna need the 3 acre permit.
What did we hear from Deputy Commissioner? Wasn't it that,
This morning.
yeah, I thought he said
This is specific to this fair, but in general, I thought when the site is not allowed, just sort of like Rutland's case, for those sort of things, there was an exemption in the 3 acre rule already. Not, I mean, this is specific to this fair, but there was something, it's kind of.
When you do the manual, you do your engineering feasibility analysis. And it depends on what your performance goal is. And then you do that to the extent that you can. And normally you would have to pay an impact fee to meet the rest of your measure. I don't know what you're referring to.
Anybody remember?
May have been referring to what you just said, Mike, that you can do what you can and then pay if you can't do any more than that. But Rutland essentially is in a different category.
like an offsite mitigation?
The offsite
Yeah.
mitigation was the clear option, but there was still an impact fee. They are waiving the impact fee for the road.
So offsite is an option. It's not a clear option because you have to find a project in the same watershed. And that is not as easy as it sounds.
Certainly, given their
Right.
downtown.
So the Rutland Fair is getting a break here. The commissioner, DEC, which is part of ANR, supports this. We heard from the deputy commissioner this morning. That's what John's referring to. And the fairs obviously support it.
Yeah, I mean. Yes, I haven't talked to anyone directly at the fair, but people are still a little irritated.
Okay. Well, they're irritated enough, maybe we'll hear directly from someone. And I just wanted to, just so that for everyone's sake of clarity, we heard this morning from the Agency of Agriculture, they still support sections 2 and 3. So administrative support for everything so far.
Section 5 was language that was added in the Senate Ag Committee. As you know, agricultural land can qualify for use value appraisal. One of the ways it can qualify, if it's not owned by a farmer, meaning somebody who gets 50% or more of their income from farming, it can also qualify if it's up to 25 acres and it's producing $2,000 in 1 of 2 or 3 of the 5 calendar years preceding of income from the sale of farm crops. There are farms that are donating their crops and are ineligible for enrollment in use value because they are not selling their crops. Now, Ways and Means looked at this provision this morning. Anything that affects use value affects the education fund. Ways and Means was not prepared to approve this because they had taken no testimony on it. And they asked for an amendment to remove it.
Okay. That's section 5, and then we heard earlier
Are
to,
you going, John? Going.
Hey, John.
take care, John. Yeah, and then we had the tax department in to testify this morning. They had some procedural concerns or questions that they raised on that.
If something like this were to go through, donated farm crops, someone that John had said earlier could donate 500 bales of hay to their local neighbor, at $4 a bale, that's 2,000. I think you'd want to say donate it to a nonprofit, a a 501c3 type deal. Make it, stamp it a little heavier, like the food shelf or whatnot.
Okay, let's keep going just to have
Okay.
a walkthrough.
Section 6 is very technical. Prior to 2016, the state rules that the agency published were not all uniformly published anywhere. They might not even be, you might not even be able to find them prior to 2016. And there was an act that was passed that required all agency rules to be published by the Secretary of State by 2018. And if they weren't published, then they were repealed by statute. Now, in 98, the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation adopted an emergency heavy cut rule. And the General Assembly then subsequently said it didn't have to be emergency anymore. It could be considered as permanent and it would live on until amended. It's never been amended. So the department has always considered the General Assembly statement that it would continue on as meaning it would continue on. And if you just read that language, you would think that, oh, it's just still in effect. But then you have to overlay that APA language that said it had to have been published by 2018, and it wasn't published in 2018. So the department is looking for the retroactive application of that rule back to the date where it would have been repealed. So you will see, notwithstanding 1 VSA 2014 to the contrary, that's the provision that says all laws are prospective. The provisions of 3 VSA 848C, that's the repeal if you didn't publish, shall be deemed not to have repealed the Department of Forest and Parks and Recreation rule entitled Intent to Cut Notification Emergency Rules. And the provisions of that rule shall be deemed to have continued in full force and effect and remained valid. And then all actions taken by the department from July 2018 through 2025 to grant or deny an authorization to proceed with the heavy cut are valid and enforceable. And then then there's the directive that the department needs to publish the rule. So the department has stated that they have taken no enforcement provisions under the rule. There's no ongoing enforcement under the rule. So no one's due process has been affected by any action under the rule between 2018 and 2025. Any enforcement that they've saw it was under the statute, not under the rule. And so this is really a very technical fix to something that the department didn't think repealed because of the language that you authorized their emergency rule with, but technically was repealed in 2018 because they did not publish that rule. In addition, and maybe Rep. Lipsky can correct me, but it's my understanding that heavy cuts are not that frequent because many landowners have their land in use value, and use value needs to be managed according to a forest management plan. And most forest management plans are for the long-term, 10-year or more management of that stand, and not about the highest, best profit you can get from a tract at one point. So there aren't as many heavy cuts in the state as you might think. With that said, there are still companies out there that own large tracts of land, Northeast Kingdom and elsewhere, that do heavy cuts, but they're not as frequent as you may think.
See Representative Lipsky nodding.
That's correct, and we, as a committee, met right after we got out of the morning session. Danny was here.
Oh, okay, I did not know that.
Articulate a lot. There are, whether it's storm or ice storms or other
Right,
infestation or a serious decline, spruce bud worm. So
Representative Burke.
I could go.
Just so I understand fully, this is allowing potentially allowing heavy cuts to take place, or
so heavy cuts are already allowed, and that's in statute. This is the rule that supports that statute. And it basically is saying that that rule continued in effect, even though technically it repealed in 2018. You're going to deem it to have continued in effect. This,
I get that part. I just wasn't sure if it was what it was allowing for. Was
What you weren't here.
Oh, yeah.
So to be clear, it requires a management plan if you're going cutting below the sea line to be approved and overseen by the FPR forestry community to make sure they're complying with all the AMPs, buffers, best practices. And it's not, if someone was going to take a chunk of forest land out to do a development, that's not what this is about. That would require removal and a whole other issues. It's a management tool that's used, as Councilor Gray said, not frequently, but it has been used. And for you, the committee's background prior, there were large timber companies that sold off their assets in the 70s and 80s. And there was abuse. And there was no regulation. And this act came as a result of the fact it was former ward lands where they were doing heavy cutting, and the legislature stepped in with FPR and passed, I think it was 98, the heavy cut policy that requires management consideration and oversight.
one of the things that I think is very important under the law is it requires them to notice the department, because anything up to the heavy cut threshold, you don't need to notice the department. And so over that threshold, it's been deemed that that's something that Forests and Parks needs to know about. If just for management of water quality or management of what they do with after the cut, and so.
So, but this is more just cleaning up. So
One
mistakes.
rule,
Yeah.
like one
Okay.
deadline.
It's not gonna really change anything.
28.
True technical change.
It is really, it's a really technical thing. There's a couple of moving
Got it.
parts here that aren't intuitive. That takes you to section 7. Last year, the General Assembly adopted a covered household hazardous product extended producer responsibility program. And it defined what the products were that were subject to the program. One of the things that it excluded was paint, architectural paint, and the way that architectural paint is defined, it's not, that it's not intuitive. It's interior and exterior coatings for structures. That's what architectural paint is. So there was a question of whether or not paint thinner, aerosol, driveway paint, all of the different types of products that you can think of were supposed to be covered under the Covered Household Hazardous Products Program or under the paint program. And so what this section 7 does, it defines the exception from the Covered Household Hazardous Products Program. It's now going to exclude 4 categories of paint products. And we'll get to that in about 20 pages because sections 8 through 13 are conforming amendments to the Covered Household Hazardous Products Program. This program is new. It's first or one of the first in the country to regulate these types of products. The manufacturers say they need more time and they need to collect more information about how to run this program. So what they've asked for and received in this bill is instead of going to a full term plan right away in July of 26, they are going to have an initial plan. I mean, in July of 25, they're going to have an initial plan. And then 3 years from then are going to have a full term plan, which will have all of, it is July 26 for the initial and then July of 29, or 6 months after the full plan is approved. So normally when you do these EPR programs, it's pretty boilerplate right now. You provide for free collection. You have a convenience requirement. You tell them they have to manage according to environmental standards. You tell them they have to have education. You tell them they have to fund all of the people that are part of their collection system in an equitable way. The problem with this program and with setting up that kind of robust collection plan right away is they don't know everyone that's going to be part of this program. They don't know every product that's going to be part of this program. So they want a 3-year kind of on-ramp initial plan. And that's what you give them on page 34, where they still have to have free statewide collection. They still have to pay for the cost of collection, which you will see here on page 38. But all of the convenience and the performance rate and they don't know what they don't know yet. So they're going to take 3 years to figure out how to do this program. And then in 29 or 6 months after the subsequent plan, they have that robust plan with free statewide collection, with convenient collection, public education, compliance with environmental standards, compliance with method of management. They're going to have a performance goal. All of this stuff is what you enacted last year. You're just moving it to a different section or subsection. And so that's what they're doing. Give them a 3-year ramp up after that full plan. One of the things this also does, it gives A&R the authority. If the stewardship organization can't get to that final plan, can't get a plan approved, then A&R has authority to adopt and administer the plan and then assess each manufacturer the prorated cost of plan administration plus a 10% assessment. So basically, if the manufacturers aren't going to do it, A&R will do it, charge them the cost of doing it, and then charge them a penalty on top of that.
I was talking earlier with Representative Sakowicz, who has joined us and will be available to answer questions about how how deeply we needed to go into this. I mean, typically, we were taking up a topic like this, we would have days and days of testimony and hear from all the interested parties. And obviously, we're not able to do that right now. We're going to be going a little bit on faith and the work that other committees have done. And when we heard from the Energy Committee earlier, kind of the same thing. Although we're a little more familiar with what's happening with the heating plant. But I guess the other thing to be aware of is that this language, I think, did pass the House earlier in another bill. Maybe you already said that, Mike.
The covered household products did, yes.
And then went to the Senate, and the Senate moved it into this bill.
Correct.
Their own.
Was that 319 it passed in?
Yes.
H319, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have, as a collectively anyway, as a body, we have already passed it once
Yeah.
this year.
So it's just making a vehicle so it gets done.
So the next main component is paint. And as we already talked about earlier, there's that revision to the definition of covered household hazardous products that exempts paint products. And so large part of these changes, which are pages 47 to 66, are just conforming, changing the term architectural paint to paint product, or changing the name of the program from the paint stewardship program to the paint product stewardship program. You do see the three new categories: aerosol coating product, kind of anything in an aerosol container for pigments or resin, coating related products, paint additives, colorants, removers, adhesives, and then the non-industrial coatings, which is kind of an umbrella: furniture oil, lime paint, marine paint, wood preservative, fire retardant paint. Now, I think the agency and the advocates did a good job of coming up with these definitions. There are going to be some products that aren't specifically listed. For example, somebody asked me the other day, what about tongue oil? And I'm like, I don't know what tongue oil is. But the agency will have discretion to say that tongue oil is or is not covered underneath these categories of products.
Is, I think, spelled TUNG.
TUNG, but right. It's like when somebody asks me that, I'm like,
It's a wood finish product.
Yes. It's not to loosen up one's tongue so they can orate for hours.
All this the time.
So we might need it for this.
So then you see that definition of paint products, which includes architectural paint, and the three new definitions of products. And then it's all conforming. It's all conforming until you get to page 64 and 65. And that is where the assessment comes into play. Currently, there is a fee that is on architectural paint when it is purchased, and those fees are listed right here. These are the existing fees on architectural paint. Half pint or smaller, no fee. Greater than a half pint to a gallon, 65 cents. 1 gallon to $2, $1.35, 2 to 5, $2.45. So how these fees used to be set was not by the legislature. They used to be set by the stewardship organization proposing to A&R what the assessment should be here, this language right here, and A&R approving the fee that was going to be charged for each of those categories of product. A&R, that's not how you do fees. Like normally fees are all set by the legislature. There's only a few instances, Department of Forests and Parks, they're like state parks fees. They're really the only one I know that has like their own fee authority. And A&R doesn't want to do it anymore because it's something that they just don't want to do. I won't characterize why. But when the bill was first proposed, they had another category for all those new 3 categories of products and what the fees would be. But they didn't have a specific amount, they had a range of amounts. And the Ways and Means Committee, others didn't like the range. And so instead of having that range, there's a fee report on or before December 15, 2025. A&R reports back to you, the General Assembly, recommending a paint consumer fee or fees to be charged for paint products that are not architectural paint. Now, the whole expansion of the paint program goes into effect July of 26. So you'll have 6.5 months to debate what those fees should be, if any. You don't have to put fees on them for those 3 new categories of paint products.
And this is to fund the collection of.
Yes, the
Hot full cans, so they don't end up across the lake from my house.
well, half full cans, if managed properly, are not hazard. If you dry it out and it is no longer, and it wasn't lead, you can dispose of that in a landfill. But there are products, probably like tung oil, that you are not supposed to put into a landfill, and that these assessments will be used to manage their disposition.
You see, I was surprised to see lime wash on there, which is the whitewash they used to
Right.
do the inside of barns with, which I always assumed was fairly harmless.
Right, but it's about whether or not that's gonna be under covered household hazardous products or whether it's gonna be about paint. But there are ways that like things like lime wash might get covered underneath covered household hazardous products. And the stewardship organization wanted to be clear that they were not.
Yeah.
Representative Morgan.
Just to note, tung oil is a vegetable-based oil from the nut of the tung tree. So it's vegetable-based. Whether or not it's toxic in the end or not, I don't know.
Good to know.
I looked it up.
So that takes you through paint, and what's left is Rygate. I am not the expert on Rygate. I don't know if you had Ellen in to talk to you about that. My
We didn't
understanding,
have Ellen and we had Kathleen, the chair of the committee came in and
and this pushes back the dates by which the renewable power plant will have to, the base load power, renewable power portfolio plant will have to do that efficiency project by a year. And that's the bill, until you get to the effective dates. The effective date on line 13 and 14 will change because if you propose to remove use value appraisal as Ways and Means has requested, then that subsection B needs to change.
questions for Mike. Right, thanks for, I know you've been presenting this bill all day or this amendment in 3 committees. Maybe Senate too, I don't remember when it passed.
It was in the Senate on 2 other bills.
So we'll get back to you, Mike, about the amendment. So just for the committee's sake, Ways and Means, they would want to take some testimony before they removed it, that they would be removing it, essentially what would happen. So I said we would have that conversation here and Representative Webster.
I actually would agree with them. When it comes to use value appraisal, we slowed up a lot of, we were moving all over the chart with possible changes. We felt we needed more testimony and time to really act on some of those, and I think this is fits in that category as well. It's a you.
Yeah, I think that I have a little bit of understanding of where it came from, and I think that in principle, it sounds like, this might be a worthy thing to do, but I would like to have a better understanding of what the impact might be, and I think that's where Ways and Means is coming from too. And we, yes, as you point out, we entertained several ideas and then felt that, particularly this year with all the conversation about the education fund slowing down. So,
I concur more with what you said, you articulated.
well, no, I
Same.
think we're saying more or less the same thing. I do want to, because Larry joined us, see if we, I guess, have any questions. So I think that just really, for the sake of the bill reporter, I'll say again, we don't need to be prepared to answer detailed questions that might come up on the floor, because we'll have a member from Randolph, right? Yeah, who we can point to. But if anybody does want to know anything more about it, since we are going to be asked to give a straw poll, which includes everything that's in the bill, if anybody has any questions that you just want to feel comfortable about, we can.
I think the real key here is just that we've already passed this language with very little change since then. And when I reported the 319 on the floor, there wasn't a lot of questions, and there wasn't controversy.
When was that?
It was back in March.
Before approximately.
Yeah, March 25th, I think, somewhere late March. So
It all makes sense to me. I mean, we did pass it out in March, and there was something else put on 319 that downstairs couldn't absorb.
yeah, we went over sections 2, 3, and 4 earlier today, which are new to us. We passed those on a straw poll vote of 902. So, it all seems pretty straightforward and uncomfortable.
Section, so the pesticide sections and now I'll pull
Let me
it.
think of it.
Yeah, that's aside, the solid waste district's adding the $50.
Yeah, the
And the state fair.
Fair, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, state fair and the pesticide disposal, the increase in the fee, and the study.
Any questions for?
In section 6, did you look at that?
Section 6, we just heard from Ledge Council about it the way you did, but we didn't take that up for a straw poll vote.
The heavy cut rule.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, if we're gonna, per wishes of Ways and Means, take out section 5, if we're gonna get this across the line tomorrow, we're gonna have to do this in the morning.
Yeah.
So we can ricochet back downstairs.
So while Mike's here, I wanted to ask about, Mike has been, Ledge Council has been very helpful with putting together section by sections. And I don't know how much time you would need to do that.
I have a section by section with this.
It's on their webpage now.
Okay, so the bill reporter can use that. Wonderful, thank you. And then procedurally, if there's an amendment, so this is a House bill that came back, we would vote we as a committee would take a straw poll normally, right? We're not doing an official vote. If we do an amendment, does that come from the committee or does that come from people, individuals?
It normally comes from the committee. It's another straw poll because you don't officially have possession of the bill, but you can recommend whether to concur, not concur, ask for a conference committee, or concur with further proposal.
Okay, all right. And with that, so if it comes from the committee, it is the committee, it's not from the 8 members of the committee?
So that's the thing, you do a straw poll, it's still you, or whomever is gonna respond.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the reporter of 484.
Yeah.
Maybe they will stand up and say, we've reviewed this, we reviewed everything in it. We are just responding to our ways and means requests, our committee on ways and means requests served in section 5. Consequently, we move to concur with this proposal amendment.
Okay. So I think that we'll be dealing with this tomorrow. At least that was my request to the to the speaker in terms of scheduling it. And if we pass it tomorrow and it's sent over with all remaining stages expedited, yeah, the Senate should still have time to meet and hopefully concur.
I have a question. This is really to Council Grady. Let's say a committee agrees with all of it except for that section 5. Would we, it's important to us to pass all the other remaining sections. Do we take 2 votes? Or is 1 vote is to delete or strike all from?
You can do it either way. So say you wanted to specifically vote on removing the current use provision, but you know you would support the bill as a whole, regardless of whether or not the use value provision is in it. I just saw this happen in Senate Judiciary where they moved to have a vote on the one aspect of the amendment, and that was with the Senator Probst. Move on one aspect of the amendment, and it was a close vote. But then they moved to pass the bill as amended, and then it was not a close vote. So that's up to you.
What's up to the committee? I just sort of expressed my personal
Right.
preference.
So I recognizing that we're missing a couple of people here. Does anybody, so Jed already answered my question, I think. Anybody else feel strongly that we should keep section 5 in?
I actually like the idea of it, but I think that if Ways and Means says they can't support it with that, we should take it out and we'll have to just address that piece next time.
I think we should address it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good idea.
I agree.
Yeah.
Other things, yeah.
And I think we should make sure we tell the Senate that we're not, being obstructionist, but we feel like we need to take some more testimony so that our colleagues can agree. And we can agree that it's a good idea.
They will assume we're being obstructionist, whatever we do, I'm sure.
But we're not. We're really-
This session, or is we're gonna let it
And I think we're talking next session.
next session?
Because I'm hoping that this session is over.
Well, like January. I mean, I think you could.
Yeah, yes. So the same group of people, but just with.
Section 5 could be really good, but without guardrails. It could be,
Yeah, the $2,000 number, just thinking about that, and somebody did a calculation this morning and said, that's $36, a week. I don't know if that was the right math or not, but
It's a math teacher.
it can
Is that right?
use your calculator or your brain. Yes.
oh,
I mean, that's a small number, whether you're donating it or whether you're selling it. So it's a pretty small number,
I
and that's.
donated, 15 acres of hay for as long as I can remember. I'm grateful that it went to my neighbor who's a farmer.
yeah, but your neighbor who is a farmer cut the hay. And so it could be in current use because he's a farmer, whether he paid you
Right.
for it or not.
But I also easy outed in 2017 and still was very grateful that we would cut it.
Yeah.
And-
Representative Zachary is probably fascinated by our conversation. Delighted to be part of it, but I want to give him the opportunity to go on about his business if he wants to. If we don't have any other questions about paint or hazardous waste.
Or tongue oil.
I do actually.
Yeah.
What's your favorite color?
That's good.
All right.
And just,
Green.
just before I go, I'll just say, we should just confer at some point when you guys have a chance to talk about, the reporting of the bill.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
If we wanted to do that right now, we could, but
why don't maybe we can go
done
on
online.
offline, yeah. Well, look, why don't we send Mike with instructions to draft an amendment with, you can do it from all 8 of us. Or from the committee, whatever you think is right, Mike, and then we can vote that out. Maybe we'll meet first thing in the morning, right at 10, just do that quickly.
I'll go talk to Betsy and see what she.
Okay, all right, good. We could do it this afternoon too. It might be better if we had all 8 people, but
In any event, you're expecting to see the bill on the House floor tomorrow.
yes, and I will also use the next hour to sort of drive home the fact that that's the way we want to do it. Not have it mysteriously pop off the calendar today.
That's kind of what I wanted to.
Yeah, yeah.